All right, good morning, everybody, and it's my pleasure to officiate this meeting and starting with the Professional Standards Teacher Ed Board for November 14th, 2024. Welcome, everybody. Time goes really fast, doesn't it? We're back here again, and we will be again soon because we're meeting a little bit later than normal. All right, well, it's wonderful to see everybody. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit because, as you'll notice, our vice chair is not here, but she's on virtual, and I am too. That was so I could keep a better view of everybody online. So if you see me twice, I'm not trying to double up in votes or anything. But anyway, Dr. Shockley, you had some fantastic news. I wanted you to share that first and let us know why you're virtual as opposed to sitting beside me today.
Certainly, thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. Most recently, the Spencer Foundation awarded one of our research teams some funds to begin the work to move forward with essentially another Teacher Academy of Maryland. That's going to be one of our outputs. And so very excited, certainly important to our local work. And I hope certainly worth being virtual today. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share that. Dr. Allen is also on that team as well. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm in Chicago, if anyone wants to know.
And coming in clear and audio is great. All right, so congratulations to you, Dr. Allen, and everybody else on the board. And we'll give a nice round of applause for your funding. That's great. All right, so first thing on our agenda, I believe, is public comment. Did we have anybody sign in for public comment? Okay, so she's joining us virtually, and that would be? Is she available? Okay. All right, well, I'll tell you what, we can come back to that if she would happen to come online. If you happen to notice, please let me know. All right, so that moves us quickly ahead to the next item, which is our state board update, and I believe everybody got a handout for that as well. If you have that on physical paper, which you've got in front of you, that's good, but also you'll notice there are some hyperlinks in it as well, so feel free to bring that up online if you'd like.
And today we're joined by Hannah Oakley, who has recently joined the State Board of Education team, and I will let her introduce herself.
Good morning. My name is Hannah Oakley. As Kelly shared, I recently joined in the middle of August, so it has been quite a fast learning experience, so I am excited to be with you all today. And I just wanted to share, it looks like it's been a couple of months since the State Board has shared an update. So I was going to run through some of the actions that we have passed, and I know you all are looking at the same thing that I'm about to run through, but happy to answer any questions as well. So in our October meeting, the big highlight was that we passed version 4 of the literacy policy. So that is now back to MSDE. We did have a few amendments that the board approved, which were related to just adding in a couple of language tweaks about ensuring that parents know the benefits and risks of each decision that they can make around promoting their child to 4th grade, to retaining their child in 3rd grade, as well as just the options that are available to them if they do choose to promote their child to 4th grade, and what that means for the reading interventions that they will receive since they will be promoted and are still reading below grade level. So that is public. Both of those items are public, and I believe they're hyperlinked. I know you all have physical copies, but you can find them on our state board website as well. We did have an emergency regulation that we published in October, and that was related to, you might have seen in the news, that was related to ensuring that local superintendents must pass on in a confidential file information related to students that have committed or been, I'm not sure the word, adjudicated for a reportable offense. So that just strengthens the information sharing between superintendents for students that have been involved with a reportable offense. Another action that we took was related to a partial waiver for Baltimore City schools who was having some supply chain issues with their vaccine and getting their vaccine counts for all of their students for the September 30th deadline. So we did allow them some extra time there to get to work through those supply chain issues. And then we voted to authorize the superintendent to withhold 10% of a November state aid payment, as well as any subsequent aid, state aid, for, I think, a few districts. This is related to some requirements for districts to submit financial audits to the department. So we, and if, after they have multiple options and I believe a couple of, like extensions, if they still aren't able to submit those audits in time, we authorize the state superintendent to withhold part of their state aid. And then in September, so that was October, moving backwards, September, Mile presented to the board on how literacy implementation currently is going across the state. So they had some really insightful recommendations, and just through their classroom observations and LEA visits, they showed kind of some trends for us, which was really enlightening to see the need for more consistent training on interventions, MTSS, and particularly science of reading for teachers, a need to kind of expand science of reading for older grades as well. Those teachers are also seeing some kind of foundational gaps in students' reading understanding and reading abilities, and so kind of bringing that up through the elementary grades, in addition to those kind of early pre-K through grade 3 focus. And then we got an update in September about the pre-K mixed delivery system that, we're hearing some pain points from districts around that. So we are, private providers are growing, and but we're still kind of working our way to that goal that we set, which is 30%. But actually, don't quote me on that. The metrics have changed a little bit, and I might have gotten that one confused. We also passed a regulations review plan for the entire department, is going through and reviewing all of our COMAR regulations just to update them for language changes that, they might have been using outdated language. So that's going to be ongoing through the department, and then we will ultimately pass that in January for kind of just like a refresh of our COMAR to make sure that they reflect, the most current laws, regulations, citations, and language. We're also, in September, we did an analysis of cell phone policies in schools, which have been, a very popular point of discussion for many education stakeholders, particularly, from teachers, principals, and superintendents. And then I think, that's probably the highlights from the September meeting. In August, in August and in September, we got a really deep dive from the department on the state's MCAP results for ELA, science, and math. And we got to really dig in, and MSDE provided some really incredible data for us about student cohort, progress that certain student groups have made, just to help us see where we need to go. And I think we did adjust 2 metrics for math and ELA in our August meeting to have the goal be a 5% percentage point growth for annually for math and reading each year over the next 2 years. So we hope to see MCAP assessment results improve, 5 percentage points each year in terms of student proficiency. We also, in our August meeting, to prepare for the final passage of the literacy bill or the literacy policy in October, conducted an hour of public comment for stakeholders, parents, community members to just provide feedback to us on the literacy policy. And we passed a legislative platform for the state board for this 2025 legislative session, which is mainly, not legislation specific, more just broad principles, no unfunded mandates, that sort of thing. So that is kind of an overview of the last few months of the state board's action. If you all have any questions, happy to answer those.
All right, Ms. Oakley, thank you. That was an excellent summary. I'll open it up to any questions or comments from the board. You mentioned literacy and the potential for expanding the science of reading. I know this board would most likely be very interested in that as well, because we also, of course, have passed some new karma regarding teacher prep programs and science of reading and so forth. So any progress on that, I think, in the future would be also good for us to know about. So I appreciate that.
Yes, we would be happy to work with you all there, and we can work with Kelly as well.
Yeah, because now we're implementing it, so now we want to see what the results are and so forth, and see if we need tweaking,
Yes.
especially if it goes into, if there's discussion about expanding it, then that would be something that, would certainly come into our purview. So that, of course, made my little light bulb go off, so thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that. All right, any questions or comments? All right, well, thank you
Yeah.
so much. Oh, I'm sorry.
Good morning. Sorry, my hand is up on Zoom, but I don't know if you can see it.
I didn't see it, and I've got it right in front of me. My apologies.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you so much for that overview from what's been happening at the state board. My question is regarding some of the language updates to the regulations. Are the language changes more like changing certification of licensure and changing the term second language learners to multicultural learners, those kinds of changes? I'm assuming yes, and that it wouldn't be something so substantive, but I just wanted to clarify what if you could offer an example of the kinds of changes that would be included in updates to the existing regs. I think that's pretty important and helpful work.
Yes, it is absolutely just updating, and no policy changes are being made in this regulation. It is exactly that example you said, updating it from just out-of-date terminology, referring to student groups, making sure that they read in a modern sense in the way that, the language that we use now. It is not this is not a policy, or this is not a change that is making any sort of policy change, because that obviously would have to go through a separate process. This is just, right now, I think it is the kind of staff level at MSTE that are reviewing them, making sure they update, they're aligned to any, new federal legislation that is passed, and then it'll go through the directors at MSDE, and then it'll go through the assistant superintendents, and then it'll come back to the board. So these are just, as you said, kind of language tweaks to make sure that we are fully referencing all the laws that we have passed in between, when they might have made these regulations to now, and just making sure that they match the kind of way that we speak about students in the modern time.
Thank you. I know folks will appreciate your response, so thank you so much.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right, well, thank you, Ms. Oakley. We do appreciate that. We'll look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you.
All right, so before we move on, I want to go back. Did the person for public comment, have they come on yet? Okay, if it's all right with the board, let's go ahead and go back to that, and we'll go into public comment now.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, and dear members of the Professional Standards Teacher Education Board. My name is Alicia Baines, and I am here today as a parent advocating for urgent reform in Maryland's special education system. My 12-year-old son, Dean, has an IEP and previously had a BIP, a behavior intervention plan. However, we recently discovered that his elementary school failed to properly document his BIP in Maryland's IEP online system by not activating the required toggle button, As a result, I am now in the process of securing an independent educational evaluation, IEE, functional behavior assessment, FBA, and an IEE occupational therapy, OT evaluation to create a new accurate BIP based on real data. Our experience highlights systemic gaps in compliance, accountability, and the support provided to students with disabilities. Despite the school implementing a daily tracker for Dean, I am the only one comprehensively reviewing and analyzing the data to inform meaningful interventions. These failures have been compounded by instances of retaliation, including a PGCPS compliance supervisor informing Kennedy Kringer that PGCPS is no longer a vendor, leading to a cancellation on November 7th of Dean's IEEOT evaluation and further delaying essential services. In September, the school's counselor suggested to Dean that I remove his IEP so he could join classes with his friends, directly contradicting his documented needs and undermining his progress. Inconsistent implementation of his BIP and IEP has led to escalated behaviors. This summer, Dean eloped from home for the first time as a behavior triggered by frustration with a poorly executed extended school year program. These systemic issues have left my family in a continuous battle to secure the appropriate supports for my son that my son is entitled to by law. Dean has endured emotional distress, learning disruptions, and a lack of trust in the adults responsible for his care. I have faced undue stress and retaliation for advocating for my child's legally protected rights. These actions erode trust between families and schools and fail to create supportive environments for students. To address these critical issues, I urge the PSTEB to, 1, mandate comprehensive training for educators and administrators on special education law, including IEP, BIP compliance, and parental rights. Establish oversight mechanisms to investigate and address retaliation complaints while holding schools accountable. Require annual reviews of IEPs, BIPs, implementation to ensure compliance, accurate documentation in Maryland IEP Online, and effective use of tools like daily trackers. Hold staff accountable for inappropriate recommendations, such as suggesting the removal of IEPs without consideration of the student's documented needs. My family's experience underscores the urgent need for reform. Students like Dean deserve consistent, data-driven support, and parents must be able to advocate without fear of retaliation or systemic failure. I urge the board to take decisive action to address these gaps, fostering accountability, collaboration, and trust in Maryland schools. Thank you for your time and commitment to improving special education policies. Thank you.
All right, and thank you very much for joining us today. Generally, with public comment, there isn't a session of question and answer and so forth, but we do appreciate the comment. And if you would like to submit your comments in writing so we can review it further, that's excellent. We would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. All right, so we're about 5 minutes ahead of schedule, but we have our Southern Maryland presentation. Are we ready to go with that, or do we need a bit more time? Couple more minutes. All right. I would propose then let's take about a 5-minute break. That'll give them time to get ready, and then we'll come back. All right. So looking at the clock, let's come back at, I would say, 10:05. We'll give them 10 minutes. We'll do 10 minutes. That gives an extra window. When you say 5 after, it's always 10 after, but that doesn't mean 15 after. Okay. All right. So we'll break for about 10 minutes. Good on the math there, Dr. Taylor. All right, everyone, welcome back. Hopefully you had some good conversation during the break. I do, before we start with our presentation, and this will be also good for our presenters, we do have a new member on the board, and I think we might have, do we have new legal counsel as well? Not new. Not new. Substitute. Okay, all right. Well, I'll tell you what, for everyone's benefit, and pardon me for not doing this earlier, I would, if we could start with Dr. Paulson, let's just go around and do some introductions. So if you could just tell us who you are and who you represent on the board, that would be great. And then we'll go into our presentation.
Joy Bacon. I teach high school English at Baltimore School for the Arts, right up the road, and I represent Baltimore Teachers Union.
Melissa Carpenter. I teach 5th grade in Charles County, and I represent Maryland State Education Association.
Sandy Scordalis. I teach at Baltimore County Public Schools, Social Studies, and I represent MSEA.
Morning, Karen Yoho. I'm on the board in Frederick County, Maryland, and I'm here. I wore my little maid pin today, so that's who I'm for.
Good morning, Cheryl Dyson, Superintendent in Frederick County Public Schools, also here representing the Superintendent's Association in Maryland.
Good morning. My name is Garima Bott-Handley. I work for a national organization that supports early childhood education, and I am representing the Senate President's Office.
Okay, and I'm Darren Hornbeck. I teach at Linganore High School in Frederick, Maryland, Social Studies, and I'm here representing Maryland State Education Association.
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Moore. I'm a social studies teacher in Montgomery County Public Schools, and I'm also here with MSEA.
Hello, my name is Josh Davidson. I'm a 6th grade science teacher for Carroll County Public Schools, and I'm here representing the Maryland State Education Association.
Good morning. I'm Winona Taylor, and I represent the Maryland Association of Teacher Educators.
Good morning. I'm Debbie Gartland. I'm professor of special education at Towson University, and I'm on the other higher education group, MACT.
Good morning. My name is Leslie Stanton. I teach 7th grade social studies at Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women, and I'm representing Baltimore Teachers Union.
Good morning. I'm Kelly Meadows. I work at MSDE, and I'm representing the state superintendent.
And I'm Elliot Schoen with the Office of the Attorney General. I'm sitting in for Sean Fitzgerald, who is in trial this morning.
All right, thank you, everyone, and welcome, Ms. Oh, I'm sorry, and online, yes. Thank you so much. See, this is what happens when I have Dr. Shuckley next to me. Thank you all for helping out. All right, so if we could go through online. Amy, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Amy Poirier, principal at Shepherd Pratt School in Rockville, and I am here representing Mansef.
And Ebony?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ebony Terrell-Shackley. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Teaching and Learning, Policy and Leadership, and the Associate Dean for the College of Education at the University of Maryland, College Park.
All right, and Ms. McGee?
Hi, everyone. Chris McGee. I'm professor at Frostburg State University. I'm housed at USMH in Hagerstown, and I'm here representing MATE.
All right, and did I leave anybody out?
Yes, me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Keisha. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Keisha Allen, an assistant professor at University of Maryland, College Park, and I am here representing Maryland Association of Colleges of Teacher Education, MACD.
All right, and then Nikki.
Good morning, everyone. Nikki Woodward. I am a special education infant toddler specialist for visually impaired and developmental delays, representing Maryland State Education Association.
All right, and I believe we got everybody, yes? All right, wonderful. All right, so now let's transition into our presentation. We've been waiting for this for a while, so we're very glad you're here. If you could continue and just do some introductions, and we're eager to hear from you.
Well, thank you for having us, and first of all, I want to just share our appreciation for MSDE and all of our higher education partners, which have really led us to this work here. I'm Jeff Marr. I'm the Chief Strategic Officer for St. Mary's County Public Schools.
Sarah Lorick, Supervisor of Strategic Initiatives, St. Mary's County Public Schools.
Good morning. My name is Chris Mahalan Miller. I am the Coordinator of District Innovation for Charles County Public Schools.
Good morning. Joe Sampson, Middle School Principal, Calvert County Public Schools.
And the four of us have been working together for quite some time here on a Tri-County partnership. It started because we were all working on the blueprint together. So we're blueprint coordinators, or we had been until Joe went back to the principalship. And so one of the things that we've been tackling is obviously the teacher shortage and all of the efforts towards addressing the challenges within Pillar 2 of the blueprint. But beyond that, how do we address what our needs are within our school systems? And to provide a little bit of context too, I'm going to turn to the screen because our Sarah and my superintendent, Dr. Scott Smith, is joining us to provide some words as well.
And good morning, all. Scott Smith, Superintendent of St. Mary's County, and I'm just here really representing Dr. Andre Townsell and Dr. Maria Navarro from Calvert and Charles County, respectively. And I just want to say you're in for a very detailed presentation and a follow-up to a summit that was held at University of System Southern Maryland with partnership from Institutes of Higher Education as well as the 3 school systems in the University System of Maryland. We face a very challenging task, and it's certainly a challenge that the PSTEB, the Professional Standards and Teacher Evaluation Board, understand quite well. Just within our Tri-County area, we represent over 60,000 students and over 4,000 teachers and over 1,200 paraeducators, all of whom we need to make sure that we support. And as they move on or they retire, we need to make sure that we are filling the ranks behind them. And so I do think that the work that was done at the end of last year and has continued throughout this fall really will put us in a place where we can lead we can truly be leaders in different ways in which we inspire the next generation of teachers and then support them as they navigate their way through institutes of higher ed to ultimately achieve licensure with the state of Maryland. I can't say enough for the people who are before you this morning. Certainly Dr. Marr and Sarah, I'm very intimate with their work, but also I'm quite impressed with the work of Chris Miller and Joe Sampson representing each one of their counties. These are indeed the subject matter experts when it comes to the next generation of teachers and leaders in public schools in Maryland. And so with that, I will turn it back to my esteemed colleagues to present in person. And thank you very much for giving us the time to talk about our work and hopefully to find a way in which we can all put hands in together to move us forward in the state of Maryland.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you.
So I'm going to just give a few slides of context that I know are not unfamiliar to you. You all are certainly aware of the challenges of the teacher shortage. And what I want to try to do is provide this statewide issue and how it has impacted particularly Southern Maryland in our local context, and then what we're doing to address it locally. Because as Dr. Smith shared, we have 4,000 teachers that we need to support and those who come in their shoes in the future. So with that, we've seen a 27% decline in the number of teacher education graduates across the state of Maryland over the last 10 years. This is data that was put out by University of Maryland. And this is not a surprise. We know that there's a teacher shortage. We know that there are challenges in having people go through traditional paths to become teachers. We've seen then the same trend replicated when we look at then the number of licenses issued in teacher education, particularly from Maryland program completers. And then as a result, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of conditional licenses issued across the state of Maryland. And then when we take that one step further and we say, well, what's it look like in Southern Maryland? In St. Mary's County, we've seen an exponential increase. We hire about 130 to 140 new teachers in a year. And of our non-tenured cohort of about 350 teachers across those 3 years, 100 of them are conditionally certified. And so that means we've had to change the way that we support them. We have to change the way that we work with them, but also we need to find the way to get that number down. So how do we address that pipeline before it gets to us so that this number isn't as large? And I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Miller here to talk, because I know Charles County has a different lens even through their
So if you see there, we're in the center, and I am very excited to see Ms. Carpenter on the board here because she understands exactly the pinch that we are feeling in Charles County. So over 70% of our teachers that we hired for the 24-25 school year were conditional. That's a lot. And again, I know that everybody in Maryland is facing that challenge right now, but as Jeff and Joe can both say, they're catching up to us when it comes to that, but they hire less teachers. We have, if you combine Calvert and St. Mary's together, that's about the size of Charles County students that we serve. So this has greatly impacted the workforce shortage in Southern Maryland is real. And we have been hiring more and more conditionally licensed teachers. With that though, our goal is to increase the diversity of the teachers that we hire. And while you can see on here, we're looking at the percentage of students versus the teachers of color for the school year 23-24. With the increase of conditional teachers that we've hired in Charles County, we are actually diversifying our workforce. We are, I will come here before you as a Pennsylvania girl. That's right. I moved here 24 years ago thinking that I would stay in Maryland for 2 to 3 years, get my experience and go back, and here I am in Maryland, a Marylander now. And so we have recognized as a district that our recruiting efforts, we aren't finding teachers in other states anymore. So we are really reaching out to those people in our community that are already committed to living in Charles County and who are wanting to work with our students. So because of that, we are concentrating our hiring efforts in our area, which has really helped us diversify the work environment, or the workforce, excuse me. So as we know, because of that, the alternative prep programs are really the way that are serving our needs the best. We are looking for those community members who are dedicated to working with our students to find alternative pathways. And so we have created positions in our district to help support those teachers who are looking for the alternative pathways that are already living there. So as you can see here, if we're looking at our teachers of color, in particular our Black and African American completers, that really they need alternative prep programs in order to finish their licensure.
And so in Southern Maryland, we recognize that these challenges are affecting all of us, and to obviously different degrees, but we know that what we have to do is solve it together. So we've really started to look at how can we address solutions that will help us in Southern Maryland, particularly because we have a little bit of a geography problem in that we don't have access to the larger university system programs across the state. We have a couple of small programs, quality programs. St. Mary's College of Maryland produces excellent teachers, but their cohort in their Master's of Teaching program is about 20-ish, and sometimes a little higher. But that obviously isn't going to serve the needs. Towson University has a satellite site to provide for elementary education, but again, a very small program. So we have to do more. We have to do different things to address the needs that we have. And as Chris referenced too, that means tapping into those who are in our communities who want a program, who want to be part of our schools, for looking at not just those who are not in education and might have a bachelor's degree in something else, but also those within our system, paraeducators and others in support roles who want to earn what they need for becoming a teacher.
So we're thinking about our overall goal. We wanted to create a sustainable partnership that was mutually beneficial not only for school systems, but also for the institutions of higher ed. in a way that address workforce challenges beyond just filling vacancies. How do we then support, like on the previous slides were mentioned, our alternative certification folks or our paraprofessionals who are looking to go into classrooms of their own, but have a hard time doing that either after the workday or because the commute is so long to try to get to one of these other institutions. What are alternate ways that we can do that? So the summit that we held was an effort to bring everybody to the table, talk about what our common interests and goals are, to then support our folks who are trying to get into these programs. So in April of last school year, we did have the pleasure of hosting the first Southern Maryland Teacher Pipeline Summit, which boasted many partners across the state who supported teaching and learning in Maryland. This slide here represents those that were in attendance and or contributed to the event's success. So many thanks to them, and definitely want to give a shout out to Coppin State University, who definitely gave a lot to insight and information in terms of ideas coming to the table on how we can really push this work forward.
So with that being said, we know that there are lots of challenges that come with our conditionally licensed teacher. Although I said earlier I am from Pennsylvania, but I didn't come to Maryland to work in a school. I was a conditionally licensed teacher at the age of 21 years old. I came to work at the State Department, not the State Department of Education, but the State Department in DC. And some things changed in my life, and I needed to pay off my student debt, right? So I had my 4-year degree, and I started substitute teaching. I was 21. I did not have the responsibilities that many of our conditional teachers have today, right? I was, living my best life at 21, 22 years old, and I was able to handle that coursework as well as that schoolwork that eventually led me to become the conditionally licensed teacher. Today's conditionally licensed teachers, my experience, or what we're finding in Southern Maryland, is that they are moms, they are dads, they are caretakers of family members, they are retirees, so this is their second job. So they don't necessarily have all of the time and commitment needed to fast track that degree in order to get licensed. So what we are looking for with these alternative programs is really to keep in mind the needs of our conditionally licensed teachers, and how can we align their work of licensure with the reform work that comes with the blueprint, especially when we're looking at that 60-40 split with the career ladder. And so how can we support these conditionally licensed teachers to not take away from the rigor of the program, right? So we don't want to throw them in a program that's not rigorous and doesn't give them what they need, but how do we align the reform work of the blueprint with the needs of the conditionally licensed teachers?
So thinking about how do we build this from the ground up, one of the efforts is through our TAM programs across our 3 systems. And if you look at the numbers on the screen, we have seen an increase in the number of students across those programs. But one of the things about this particular year is we've seen the seniors that are graduating out, and as a result, the numbers are starting to dwindle. So in Calvert County, for example, we have 10 seniors, and then if you look at the progression, we're down to about 80 for this particular year. So our numbers are going down. I don't know what it looks like in St. Mary's and Charles, but trying to get students that are diverse, that would be interested in the program and teaching profession, to get into that has been a struggle that we've seen consistently. But then ours is also housed in each of our high schools. as opposed to being in one central location. So it looks different in other areas as well.
And so the TAM program is one example of how we need to build from that ground up. And so we have a lot of these structures in place. We have a TAM program. We have what leads into an AAT and a 2+2 model with both our community college and our higher education partners in the area. We've built out direct billing agreements and cohort models and all kinds of things that are really good structures for professional development. But we also know that that can't be where it stops. There's a lot of things that are changing and shifting, and as Chris mentioned, the changing candidates who are coming through and their needs and their life experiences that might have them go through a different path. So we have to build on those ongoing relationships and what partnerships we have. Some examples that really have been working well is working with our higher ed partners to say, how do we align our expectations with what you have in the program? For example, how does if we use the Danielson model in teacher evaluation, how do we see that in their teacher education program? We've had a long-standing partnership with St. Mary's College of Maryland with their master's program where they do action research within their schools, and how do we then learn from that experience? So there's a back and forth. What we need next is that openness to new and novel approaches, because we can't just rest on the laurels of the great programs that are there, but we have to build on them for these new experiences. And so let's take a look at our current context. And one of the things that we did in the summit was we put real examples on the table. We put scenarios about particular individuals' experiences and how they are either finding their way through a program or hitting a roadblock in that finding that program.
And so thinking about our folks that are represented or our individuals that may be in groups represented on this slide, for me, having the background as a blueprint coordinator, learning all there is about the blueprint and then taking that back into a school has been eye-opening, because we see the challenges that the career ladder presents, but also wanting to fill these vacancies that we have in our schools. And ours, for example, a lot of our schools are sitting with vacancies now across the state. And so how do we fill those, and what are we doing? And we may have career changers that we put into those positions that are going to be conditionally licensed. So then how do we support them? What does that look like across the system? We have paraprofessionals wanting to get into the teaching profession, but the coursework, the time commitment, when they get to the student teaching portion, how does that work if they have a job that they have to attend on a daily basis? So then what are the structures with these higher ed universities or institutions? How are they offering support to where these paras can get their teaching hours during the workday in the school where they currently work? So those are some unique challenges that face us as we try to collectively determine how we can best make this successful.
And so as we were going through the work at the summit, we asked these key guiding questions. What is it that's working that we need to preserve and move forward? What are the changes we need to see across all of our institutions for the next year? What is it that we specifically might need in Southern Maryland? And some of the examples, like for example, that Joe just shared, if we have a paraeducator or somebody who's working full-time, how do they take the time off when they have to support their families to be able to do an internship? Or how do they take classes that are only offered during the day? Are there other ways that we can look to provide a program? And how do we leverage particularly the University System of Maryland at Southern Maryland as a regional site? They've been a key partner in this, as Dr. Smith shared earlier, and it's an excellent hub for learning that we could be tapping into. And so that was the idea. How do we figure out the solutions? And so we have a few ideas that the group is working on.
Yes, and they were sort of fueled by the summit, but have sort of branched out under the facilitation of Amy Morton, who's with NCEE. She is also the AIB strategic facilitator for St. Mary's County. So we had the opportunity to sort of put this together as the next iteration of where the summit was taking us. Out of the summit, we established 5 work teams, as you can see here. 3 of them are focused on future teacher pathways, and we are really grateful to several of the higher education partners who come to the table consistently for those work groups. College of Southern Maryland, Towson, NDMU, UMGC are big key components who come to the table and have these conversations. 3 of those are on those future teacher pathway ideas, as we've already identified, from TAM all the way up, the conditional teacher, and how we gather that para to teacher pathway. 2 of the work groups focused on this bigger idea of what the Tri-County region may need. And one of that is the idea of how we bring down a line of teachers that not only want to come to our region, but stay. And how do we support them in that endeavor? So the resource mapping group and the public relations communications work groups are looking to establish resources that will support a campaign of sorts to encourage them and entice them to come down here. And from that, on this next slide, you'll see that we talk about what the next steps are besides attracting them down here. How we prepare them in our partnerships with higher education, how we keep them growing as they come to us in whatever capacity, whether that's the conditional teacher or the para who's been in the classroom for many years and is now leading their own classroom, and how we not only work through the new induction program, but how we keep them beyond that non-tenured status, how we keep them and foster that leadership as they continue on as educators.
And that's a very important point here, because we want them, as we say, often to our new teachers, we want you supported, successful, and staying, right? Those are the 3 S's that we absolutely want. So bringing them to the table is one thing, but getting them to thrive and stay and commit to a long-term profession serving our students is absolutely imperative. And so that induction part of it is, and I know it's on your agenda later today as well, but that is incredibly important to make sure that especially if they're coming through the door with different experiences, that they have that support in those first several years with us. So a conditionally licensed teacher has different needs than somebody who came out of a traditional program, who has different needs from somebody who had experience outside of Maryland or outside our system. So how do we differentiate those supports for them, but also make sure they're getting exactly what they need to stay? So we're spending a lot of time talking about, obviously, those 2 top boxes, but those second 2 are just as important. So if I come back to the part about the pathways, one of the elements that's emerged from our discussions is the need to have this initial pathway fully fleshed out in Southern Maryland. We talked a little bit about the Teacher Academy of Maryland program. How do we take that program and build out dual enrollment programs or early college programs that are specifically leading to an AAT for our teachers? Once they graduate with us, is there a path and a program for them that they can stay connected with us as they earn their AAT or they go on to their second 2? But that last box there is the bachelor's program, and that is an area that we have a pretty large gap in Southern Maryland. We do not have a large list of programs that if somebody wants to earn a bachelor's program, they can stay in the area. They either have to drive up the road or go to an online program or what have you, but that's something we really have to be working on. And I'm going to come back to the registered apprentice program we want to talk a little bit about too. So we've got these programs, we've got grow your own programs, we've talked about TAM, we have potential teacher programs, and we certainly tap into the Educator Rising programs. We've been providing future teacher scholarships as part of our Maryland Leads grant for the last couple of years. Now let's talk about another way that we can have employees of ours working towards gaining the experiences of becoming a teacher within our buildings. Paraeducators are a tremendous resource to tap. They bring a great deal of experience. They work with our kids every day. They're side by side with teachers and leaders within the building and learn every day what makes good teaching happen in a classroom. if we take that program and we've built out, and Sarah's just going to talk in a second about our teacher apprentice program, which we're very proud that we have a registered apprentice program from the Department of Labor. We're still working on it. There's a lot to grow on, but it was an outgrowth of our Maryland Leads program that we started a pilot, if you will, for the first couple of years, and now we're taking it to that next step. But the idea there is have somebody working embedded in classrooms, working side by side with a teacher, learning and growing, and then becoming a teacher on the job.
Yes, and so out of that Maryland Leads grant, we were able to establish some positions in special support of our Board of Education, as well as our superintendent, who fully believes in this program. We were able to establish positions to offer real world experiences and opportunities to future teachers. So they spent the first 2 years after a successful pilot through the Maryland Leads. We were able to then, as Dr. Marr said, apply for a registered apprenticeship program. We are the first in the state through the Maryland Department of Labor. We're very excited about that. This is a new burgeoning project, and we're excited to see where it's going. We still have a lot of steps, including having that partner on board to sort of support that collegiate component. But the biggest pieces that we've gained from the teacher apprentice program are that the apprentices are immediately recognizing that this is for them, or for some, that this is not for them. And that's what we want. We want them to have those experiences. So while they may be part-time, and you can turn the slide, I can move on from there, but while they may be part-time college students, they are truly full-time in their craft. And that's where we really are leaning to our colleges to find opportunities to recognize that experience that they're bringing to the table. That is a huge component. It shouldn't take them just because they're doing a full-time job as a para-educator. We call them super paras for our teacher apprentices because they have a little more flexibility in their day. But it shouldn't take them that much longer to get their degree simply because they're going part-time for their collegiate program. So we want to find ways to build that partnership. For our apprentices over the last couple of years, we've had some really successful experiences where the colleges have come to the table and offered a flexibility in their field placements. So when they've had to do 20 hours in a science classroom, we were able to adjust their schedule in a day to meet that need. And they were willing to be flexible to say, you can stay at your school to do that. We also last year were able to pilot one opportunity with an out-of-state university nonetheless, but a university who was willing to partner for a student internship experience, that they were able to stay in their program and do 60% of their day in with this one lead teacher that you would normally see in a student field experience, and 40% still supporting the school as needed by the Maryland Leads grant. That was a piece that came out of there. So we're really appreciative to the universities who have stepped up and offered these abilities to flex what is happening in the traditional pathway and recognizing this alternate pathway. We've had great success as we talk about demographic needs to sort of balance our community. We've seen great success with our apprentices meeting that demographic need to look more like the students that they're teaching. And that's been a really great blessing. And all of the schools, over 300 teachers in that first iteration for the 2 years were being supported by our apprentices. Now that we're in the registered apprenticeship program, they are spending 50% of their day with one specific lead teacher. So that is a little bit of a different iteration, but now they're getting on-the-job learning immediately with this veteran teacher in a side-by-side environment.
And we're very proud of the fact that some of these have become teachers and they're thriving quite well. We did have a couple of them that went back to a paraeducator role because that's what they chose, and some who left as a result of just an end of year change in their lives. But one thing that, and Sarah alluded to this, is we're working now towards finding our college partners who are able to work with the competency-based model within the apprentice program. That is, can they show evidence of their understanding of the skills and knowledge that you would have in a typical course because of what they're doing day to day? If they're working on providing accommodations for an IEP, how does that reflect what would have been in the special education class? If they're implementing formative assessments and analyzing those results and changing instructional practices as a result of that, can that show evidence towards the assessment of learning course that they might need? Those are the kinds of thinking that we need to be doing with our apprentices who are on the job. Now that's one challenge, obviously, is overcoming that different lens through which we look through coursework and programs. But funding and sustainability, obviously, we're very fortunate that we began this with Maryland Leads, and our superintendent and our board are committing to holding positions. We have 10 in this coming budget for them. So that will help us to build a program, but obviously it's something that has to be invested in, not an expense, an investment in these future teachers. And so as we look to this, I just want to flesh this out a little bit more. This is a key question for us. How do we overcome the challenges of traditional coursework structures or seat time requirements so that we can have competency-driven examples of work that are tied to those meeting the expectations of teacher licensure in the program? How do we look at those differentiated opportunities? Can we structure classes and days so that they might not have as many hours in the day that they can go to class, but they are certainly doing the work on the job? And are there ways that they could have some of that time after school or through reflections or through a portfolio-driven assessment of their work? That's what's going to help this program move, and that's what's going to help it expand across the state, is that giving that accessibility to those who are within our schools and already committed in our schools, whether they be a formalized apprentice program or a paraeducator or other support who might be within the building who want to earn teacher certification as well and need that avenue to become teachers. So we've structured some of these ideas out. We're getting close on many of these. We have some seeds planted, and now we just need the tree to grow a little bit for our teacher academy. And how do we link that then? But you can see that it could really progress through. They come out of high school, they've got some dual enrollment credits, they roll into an AAT program, and while they're in that program, they're employed by the school, embedded into classrooms, where they then complete their BA, and then the next step is rolling over to be a teacher for their own classroom. So I want to just yield to the rest of the team here to see if there's any other comments, but we're very proud of the work and just the collaboration across the systems and for our partners who have come to the table. Yes. And if you all have any questions,
all right. Well, I can certainly understand why you're proud. You have a lot to be proud about. Thank you for a wonderful presentation and guiding us through all of that. I'd like to open it up for questions and comments, and I can see there's quite a bit. All right, go ahead.
Thank you so much. That was, these days I'm looking for bright spots, and this feels like such a bright spot, so thank you so much. I'm going to call out a couple things and then 2 quick suggestions and 1 question. I love that you are solving the right problems. I feel like so many times when we are trying to recruit new teachers, we're like, we just need a better marketing effort. Like, we're throwing out all these ideas, but you all were talking to teachers to try to understand what are the actual roadblocks, what are the actual barriers. As someone who ran an alternative teacher prep program here in Maryland for 5 years, our average age of teachers was 30 years old. You might have young kids. It's really hard, as someone who has a 1 and 3-year-old, it's really hard between the evening hours to do coursework. I'm just trying to feed my kids and get them to bed, right? So I love that you're solving for the actual problems. Love the summit. My audio is going in and out. Sounded like an idea party. Like, love all the collaboration and the generation. That's so great. 2 quick things. I would, as you're bringing folks in, I would keep surveying them on what their experience is like in this program. What do they need more of? What do they need less of? Continue to be responsive to the needs once you've even recruited them into the program, so you can just continue to adapt and grow. Forgot what my second thing was, but my third question for you, we say this every month here, is your recruitment challenge a retention challenge? Like, I guess this is more of a question, as you're trying to bring in more teachers, have you looked at your retention data? Have you looked at exit surveys? Like, what are the core reasons why teachers are leaving the classroom? Because as we know, it is far less expensive to retain a great teacher than it is to bring in a great teacher, right? So just curious to hear a little bit about retention data and what you might be doing on that front too, so that once you bring in teachers through this incredible program, you're not then losing them too.
Well, our experience in St. Mary's certainly might be different than Charles or Calvert. I will say we're affected a little bit by the base in Pax River, and so we do have some transiency there as a result of that. But we tend to have about a 92% retention rate is what our data over the last several years have been, and we attributed that to an induction program that we hope is responsive to the needs and attends to not just what they need for their own professional growth, but their personal growth too. So those relationships that we build are really important. For example, one thing that we do with Dr. Smith is we go and visit teachers at their school and just ask them how it's going, and just have conversations with them about what they need. And then you have to listen. When they tell you there's something that has to change, you have to do it. And so following through on those needs is really important. And then differentiate. I mentioned differentiation because that's incredibly important. We can't just say one size fits all on whatever PD that we're offering. We bring them together once a month, and we bring them collectively because we think that helps form a connection with their peers. But then once they're there, there's a lot of breakouts and split ups to sort of respond to their specific needs. And then the mentoring and direct support at the school to make sure those mentors have their support so they know how to be responsive to the changing needs of their new teachers. In fact, we've done different professional development for mentors around what a conditionally licensed teacher needs versus what somebody who is experienced or has some formal training to the table.
All right, and Ms. Yoho?
I turned it off. There we go. So I think I've said before here, I think I'm the only position where we're elected, and that's a different skill set that you have to do. So questions always came up. I ran in 2018 for the first time about how to get more teachers. And one of the ways I looked at it was what would keep people, what would bring them to Frederick County, what would keep them there. So I was wondering when you said supported, successful, staying, I think we both wrote that down. So what do you market your counties? Do you try to find ways to draw people and say, here's what we have that is so unique? Or if you could talk about that aspect.
So we don't have a 92% retention rate in Charles County. I'm going to throw that out right now. We have retention issues in Charles County. And some of that is because of the high number of conditional teachers that we do hire and because of the commitment that it takes to become licensed on top of the day-to-day teaching. Yeah. That's a problem for us. So what we're currently doing right now in Charles County is we're piloting 2 innovative schools, and they are schools, they're both community schools. They have highly impacted students there. And so we are looking at ways in which to pilot the implementation of the career ladder. So what we did was we surveyed several teachers with our strategic facilitator that was funded through the AIB, and we looked at patterns of teacher turnover. And let's be honest, I don't have a filter, but I'm going to behave here. We have teachers, and I'm sure everybody knows this, and they have them in their districts. Once you get to this school, you don't leave, right? Because they're the golden schools in the district. But what's going to entice you to leave? So we looked at those patterns at those schools, and we went to those teachers, and we said, what would make you leave this school? So we did focus groups. We collected some really good points to consider. And so that's what we're starting to implement at our innovative schools. What is it that would make you leave this school to come to another school? And I hope that Melissa can also say that we have a really great relationship with our Teachers Association. So they were present at this summit, and they're present on these committees as well. Our superintendent believes that they have a voice at our table because they're the ones that do the work day to day. So of course, their voice was included in this as well. So as we're starting to implement the career ladder, They wanted job-embedded professional learning during the day. They wanted support, more instances for co-teaching and more instances of coaching, because at these highly impacted schools, many of our teachers have less experience than they do at our other schools. So we are embedding those supports for the day to try and get these other teachers to move. So we're in our first year of piloting. We did have several teachers take advantage of that opportunity to have additional planning, to have additional times for co-teaching, to have additional times for structured planning times. And so we're hopeful that that story will build the idea of people leaving these classrooms that they've been at for so long to come teach at schools that we have trouble with staffing. So that story is to be told. Hopefully, invite us back in a year or so. But we are very hopeful that getting the input of our teachers will help with that.
All right, and I'm not quite sure who was next in line. I saw Ms. Stanson.
Well, so again, I just think the presentation was amazing. I think this is such a huge issue for educators. I am curious about if you did any investigating into sort of the need for teachers to have the soft skills that kind of allow us to then be great educators. I think that when you hear about teachers leaving the classroom, it's usually not because like they didn't know how to write a lesson plan, they didn't know how to like grade and give back feedback or whatever. It's that they're really feeling challenged by some of the emotional and behavioral needs of so many of our students. And I'm curious about, are there structures in place? Is there kind of a framework for making sure that that support exists from the leadership on down so that teachers can actually teach?
I'll just lean into one piece of that. And one of the strengths of the teacher apprentice program that we've seen is it's offering them that very gentle, hands-on approach to building those skills, in addition to understanding the learning management system of the county with which they want to grow into and being comfortable with the content of high-quality instructional materials that are there in their county. They're also getting that opportunity to craft that teacher letter, to have that interaction with the principal, with a guide on the side of that sponsor teacher. And so I do feel like that's offering them an opportunity for those that might be second career or just need additional supports in those skills to have that.
All right, Ms. Carpenter.
I didn't quite hear you. Okay, so first off, I've been so excited about this presentation. For those of you that don't know, I was from Charles County, went back to Charles County after attending Salisbury University to teach. I actually started as a long-term sub in St. Mary's County, and if you can believe it, the next year was a hiring freeze because it was really hard to get a teaching job at the time. So that is how long I've been teaching. But I'm so glad to hear this presentation because it touches on so many things that I think we've talked about, specifically the time for conditional teachers. Our conditional staff have changed, or our conditional teachers have changed, and we need to make sure that we're reflecting on that. And so I love that you guys are doing that. I also really appreciate that there's so much teacher input that's so obvious in this presentation because it's not just somebody telling teachers what they need to do. It is really reflected. I also just want to let you know that it is starting to work. I currently work with a TAM teacher who did not go to college for education and actually came back because his TAM teacher reached out to him. So it's very, very important that we continue to support and promote these programs, and I hope that I get to continue to do that. I look forward to your next presentation and your next summit.
You can mark your calendars. I think it's March 28th. So anyone's welcome. But that's kind of the point of this is not, you don't make change in one day. This is taking time and effort and a lot of commitment. So but I also want to, as Chris alluded to, the support and the collaboration with all of our partners, including our education associations who have been at the table for all of this. We couldn't have gotten our apprentice program off the ground without a collaborative effort. And so thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, Ms. Bacon and then Dr. Paulson.
Thank you for your work. My question specifically is about the work with the higher education partners, and particularly for conditionally licensed employees. To what extent do they want my license is through a university that is recognized elsewhere, as opposed to potentially looking into the options of licensure that is sort of homegrown and doesn't necessarily have a coursework that you are sort of working in the other direction? Because I know some teachers might want that, like, I want the degree, but particularly if you're talking about retirees or career changers that might not have any financial interest or sort of long-term interest in another piece of paper from a university, but want to be fully licensed and what that and tenure and pay and those kinds of things. So I'm wondering what that balance looks like for you.
I could, I'll start and then please jump in. We have talked with other EPPs about programs they could provide, and the question always does come out is, how is this going to link into a master's program or graduate program? Because they know that that's also something that translates outside of the state. So that question always does come up. The answer is always, it depends, okay? Because for some of our conditionally licensed teachers, they want to be on the, they want to be licensed as soon as possible because A, it helps them get pay and step increases and all the other things that come with it, but it also helps them to advance to that next level of the career ladder. You have to have your license before you can go for NBC. All those other pieces are important. However, I think one of the bigger gaps is not necessarily for the conditionally licensed teachers to become licensed. There are programs, there's multiple programs for a conditionally licensed person to earn their degree, whether it's through an accelerated certificate or a master's of arts in teaching, and there's multiple programs. It's again that precursor to that to get them to the BA that also earns them another degree. And so that's the bigger challenge we're trying to solve, is having the accessibility of those undergraduate programs that lead to a degree and licensure. Certainly, providing that link to a graduate program is helpful, but I don't know if that's been the bigger question for us as much as it is about getting that initial.
So I look at it this way. For us, I think the general idea is that it's a mindset shift that has to take place with everyone involved. Because does it matter the name on the paper, or does it matter the skills that the person brings to the table to be able to do the job? And so when we have those conversations about what it looks like, that's what's really important. Does this adult that we're going to put in front of children know what they're doing? How do we know it? They can demonstrate it. Does it matter where they went to school or how they got their degree? Not necessarily. And when we look at other professions, they're already doing those things. But we just have to catch up. So that's what these summits are about.
And I would also say that for some of our conditionals, the short answer is they just want to be told what the next steps are. They want a very clear and transparent pathway in front of them that says, take these 12 classes, take these 2 during this semester, because their bandwidth is so limited by the fact that they're all consuming in being the best teacher that they can be with the resources that they already have. So if we can give them that transparent pathway, and part of with the Leeds, the Maryland Leeds grant, we had a really great relationship with a university who offered a very transparent pathway, and we had such great success with them completing that. And the courses were designed where the first 12 were what they needed for that accreditation, for that licensure. And then when they were ready, they could say, here are the next, let's just say it's 6. Here are the next 6 courses. When you're ready, we're here for you. There's that next degree, there's that next hurdle. But at least sort of putting that parcel of here's what you need first and here's what it can look like, I think is super helpful.
Okay, Dr. Paulson.
All right, thank you. I had a list of questions, so I'll try to consolidate. You answered the first one, which was, can others attend the summit? Because I think under Maryland Leads, with what happened with everything to do with teacher pathways, teacher pipelines, we all have things we've been doing. We all have things we can learn from each other, and we have a very robust program, but we're alone with it in Harford County, and so I don't know the degree to which my folks have been able to get out and learn from what you've done. One thing I would, well, so actually that kind of led to the part two of the question is, so what happens post Maryland Leads, right? The money's out for everybody, and we've had these great things. I set aside a little bit of money in Hartford to keep it going, but, so that would be my first question, and I want to come back with one thing after you finish. So what are you guys thinking of, where does this go now post Maryland Leads? And I think with regard to recognizing what we're dealing with, a teacher shortage, and the blueprint didn't necessarily anticipate all of this, the Maryland Leads ended up being one of the best things that's happened over the last few years, particularly, in my mind, this was the part of it that really generated the most benefit for the state. Do we relook at how we structure blueprint priorities, things like that, to do stuff like this? I feel like I teed something up that wanted to answer.
No, I just, I feel like we have to, right? If we are all collectively saying that we have a workforce shortage issue, one of our biggest barriers to that is the funding. We have para-educators, and we have made agreements with many of our institutes of higher ed to forward fund the tuition reimbursement. But again, looking at the competencies that they already have to offer, where can we find programs that recognize competency and I'm not saying that, please don't think that I'm saying nobody should sit and take any coursework, because I don't believe that. But I do recognize that if we're asking as educators to differentiate the needs of our students, why are we not doing the same thing when it comes to our adult educators? So finding those programs and funding them, funding those opportunities for the apprenticeship programs where you're not spending 100% as a paraeducator in a classroom supporting students, but you also have that time to demonstrate or to practice those competencies. That requires additional funding. And if we all read the doom and gloom that's coming down the pike, again, no filter, how do we continue that? Because our biggest issue comes back to recruiting and then retaining, right? So we have a huge issue with retaining our teachers, and it's because we don't have necessarily the funding necessary to provide these supports. So when we're talking about reallocating funds and we're talking about Maryland Leads and money that has gone away, how can we bring that money back?
And can I just add one piece to that too? And Dr. Bolson, you hit the nail on the head. It does come down to money and supporting it and finding that way to sustain it, because while, again, we're fortunate that our board is supporting these 10 positions, but 10 isn't enough to fill the larger gaps that come. But also the biggest question that we get from college partners who have come to the table is, how do we guarantee that this program is going to go forward? How do we know that we're going to be able to pay for the instructors and everything else that comes with it? Because there's a pragmatic side to this that says we can offer the courses, we could design stuff, we could create a program, but we need to know there's a cohort in place. And so that takes a commitment financially, both from school systems, but also an investment probably on the higher ed side as well, to say, is this something I want to look at for the long term versus the short term? And so it's a question that we talk about all the time in our work is, this is really great, how do we build it to sustain it as well?
Yeah, it seems, there are possible state solutions here. The money doesn't have to flow through the schools, it doesn't have to flow through higher ed, but it does have to flow. Right? To some sort of, and I know there's been money that was floated out there as forgivable loan type scholarships and things like that, and I don't know the scale of that statewide. I know we have some things like that, I just don't know enough about it. The last thing I wanted to touch on was, when I get to this slide, the one that kind of covers like the major elements, the thing I heard less about was the consistent structures in place for supporting teachers once you have them. And my belief is, in this time of shortages, it's the districts that really figure out support that are going to be the most successful, because otherwise you're seeing so much turnover, right? And so I wanted to put one idea on the table, and this is really different. And in fact, when I've shared it with my superintendent colleagues, I got crickets. Because, so North Carolina, one of the best things I came across down there was North Carolina's new teacher support program. And it was a university-based support and induction program. And again, this was a statewide initiative. It wasn't just, the universities actually provided the coaches who went into the schools. So the districts weren't hiring their own coaches. The universities collaborated, because it was across campuses, to train the coaches, deploy them regionally based on where the campuses were. There was a state fund. There was a few $1 million that was given to the program to subsidize this, but then school systems had to essentially participate. They paid a reduced amount for the coaching time. And, you know, depending on the need in the district, half to a third of the cost of coaching, and then the system picked up the rest. So the point was, this was a statewide initiative. It had some coordination, but what it did is provided coaches who were consistent across the state. I mean, it really did a nice job of reducing the variance of the quality of the support teachers got from district to district. And it's ambitious, but it's not hugely expensive. And I think, and that may not be the exact answer for the state of Maryland, but we need something more consistent in the support side, because we're all trying to go this alone. And frankly, this year it scares me that our coaching support may need to be one of the things. Like, I have a $60 million budget gap I've got to figure out in the next couple months. And supports are a place that's going to take a huge hit. And so if there were a statewide solution to focus on this, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up in this setting is this is one of the places where we have a really rich dialogue between higher ed and K-12, and the people to come up with the answers are sitting at this table. But that's just an element in here that, you know, so if I'm sort of envisioning the next summit, I'd love to have a stream of you know, breakout sessions or conversations or whatever that also hit this support side.
Yeah.
Because you got a lot of great stuff in the others.
So I've been very lucky to belong to a collaborative with the Council of States, the chief, I always get it mixed up, the Chief Council of State School Officers, there we go. And I've been on a collaborative called SEAT. It's the Systems to Elevate Excellent Teaching. And so Delaware has a very comprehensive teacher induction program that is housed within the State Department. And I think looking at between North Carolina and what Delaware has to offer, maybe there's some investigation that we can do from both ends to see how that's supported. But Maryland or Delaware State, and I have their contact information, it is very comprehensive, where the state is involved very deeply when it comes to the induction of our teachers. And I know that MSDE used to be very much involved in that, and I don't know the role that it continues to play, but I think with changes that have taken place, I think it would behoove all of us to look at those supports between the state and institutes of higher ed. But I know when we have been working collectively with our institutes of higher ed, they are too facing a workforce challenge, right? And so when we're even looking at we have a very rigorous early college program in Charles County where we send our students to the College of Southern Maryland for their associate's degrees. But one of the early college programs that they are not able to offer yet is the AAT, the Associate of Arts degree in teaching. So looking at the work always comes back to the districts. I'm sure, I don't want to speak for Dr. Dyson and Dr. Paulson, but if you look at the blueprint, the work comes back to us, right? So we're the ones that have to find the teachers. We're the ones, I feel like sometimes we're house hunters, looking for spaces for pre-K programs, right? So when we can't find those spaces, or we can't find the private providers, the work always comes back to us. And so we're just looking for ways in which we can not pawn our work off on other people, but we can't say that there's a workforce shortage and we can't do what we're supposed to do.
One last thing I'll add. Several years ago, worked for an organization called TNTP, and we administered, it was called the Insight Survey, thousands of teachers across the country, and it was a correlation of what do teachers that stay, what were the factors that contributed to that, and the three things that came up: teachers who feel valued, teachers who feel heard, and teachers who feel like there are opportunities for growth and development. When they have those three things, they stay at much larger rates. I don't want to be naive because money is so important, but to your point, the doom and gloom, we're going to have to look for some cost-effective solutions. Those three things can be free, right? The types of actions that we take to make those three things true can be absolutely free. So I encourage us to think about that too. And I'm not saying that, a principal focusing on efforts that value staff, positive feedback, I'm not saying that can, keep a teacher who's looking at other things, but I do think it contributes. Even in my work day, when I'm getting positive feedback from my boss, it's contributing to a greater sense of self-confidence. And so I urge us to look at that data too and think about what are the free things we can do that align with the data. One last thing I'll share. In some of those schools, principals held what's called stay conversations with teachers at the end of every year, and they were coached by the district on how to facilitate these conversations. And it was just as it sounds. It was a conversation where principals were asking teachers explicitly to stay for the next school year, and they shared the positive feedback. And again, just that explicit, you are a valued member of this community, we really want you back next year, oftentimes made the difference between teachers who rejoin that school community or look for other things the next year. So I'm trying to think about cost-effective ways that we can contribute to retention too.
All right, anyone else? I did want to mention something, and this kind of goes to Dr. Bolson's point, but I'm going to offer an additional viewpoint, and this is in no way a criticism whatsoever. But I think our current paradigm generally to address teacher retention is what supports can we put in place for the teacher? And granted, I think that is incredibly important. But I think we also have to ask the question, why do the teachers need that much support? Why have we created environments by which the working conditions require this much after a teacher has completed a high-quality 4-year program to put them into the classroom? And the slide that made me think of that, and I think this is excellent, where you really did lay out what is the win-win-win. And you get to the center section, this was on page 25, the teacher gets support for small group instruction, individualized needs, classroom management, data tracking, clerical tasks, flexibility to connect, and I think if you ask any teacher, that list goes on and on and on. And it's great when you have that support, but that support is not tenable. And you're still going to be left with all this. And until we start to address what the average teacher's working condition is like, overcrowded classrooms, so many clerical tasks that have to be completed, meetings that have to be done, PD that does not align to the needs of the teacher, unless we solve those problems, teachers will solve them, and they solve them by quitting. So it has to be a combination of, yes, do we have the supports in place, but we have to make sure we don't put teachers in such a position by which they need that much support and feel ineffective and leave. So I see this as a wonderful thing, I really do. But I also think our paradigm has to switch to both instead of just give them support. If we just give better PD. Well, no, I'm sorry, but sometimes if you've got 35 kids in a classroom and 2/3 of those might have an IEP or BIP, there is no way you can support that. There is no way you can do that. So we have to be much more realistic, and either we have the money we need or we don't. Either it's a priority or it's not. But let's stop saying, well, we'll do the best we. I'm sorry, if you don't have it, you can't do it. It's like the way the post office used to work in the 1980s when letter carriers were given 20% more mail than they could actually deliver in a day. And they went postal. That's where we got the term from. I mean, seriously, I teach a sociology class. You see what I'm saying? Teachers are often, I think, almost in the same positions by which I need you to do all of this. And by the way, here's this, and I need more training with this. I can't do it all in a day. And I want to because you go into those professions because those kids are so important to you. And that frustration. And I think the other question, one of the things I loved is the idea of talking to students about why they might want to go into education. Because it's so clear you provided that information of what teachers tell you, and you've incorporated that in your work. Another thing I think that's such an eye-opening thing is when you ask students, do you want to become teachers? You know, there's 10 minutes at the end of class where somebody's getting ready or they got accepted. What are you going into? How many of you want to be teachers? Why has it dropped so much? Because, you know, I think back to the way I started teaching and then the advent of No Child Left Behind. And when I ask teachers or I ask students, like, why would you not want to teach and go into the classrooms? They're not always as good at articulating it, but what I often get a sense is they didn't quite enjoy their education to the point where they want to spend their whole life back there. Because we're testing factories. Because the pressure of high stakes everything in the last 20 years have created an environment by which I want to do it and then leave. And you get those students who have sometimes come out with a more rounded, authentic assessment approach where they create and do and learn. And those kids, I think, are the ones who are more likely to say, oh, I can't wait to come back into the classroom. But for a lot of students, I don't think that's the experience they get. It's how many tests you can pass and how many high-stakes classes you can take. So I don't know, and I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but your work is so important, and it just needs to grow. And we just need to expand, I think, the information that we're getting. That's why it's so important to understand why teachers are leaving and why kids don't necessarily see this as the place they want to spend their lives as a career. So, but I applaud your work. Anybody, and I'm sorry to take too much on the floor. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, and online. Go right ahead. Nikki.
Hi there, Nikki Woodward. I, number one, don't want to go after Darren because I think he brought up a lot of amazing points that I don't want us to lose focus on as we transition and as you all transition. But I do want to elevate and thank you for that work. As someone who has spent the last 3 years in my own local supporting hundreds of conditionally certified, I come from a larger local. This is so important, and I appreciate elevation of this work. I do want to ask, I couldn't tell which county the individual spoke who said that they had the TAM program in all of their high schools. I wanted to say that is amazing because one of the barriers is that oftentimes students have to choose between what some would see as more advanced academic classes and instruction over some of the programs, especially in a lot of the counties, they're program based. So number one, I wanted to elevate you all for having that. But I also wondered if the conversation had with student bodies around availability of those classes and programs, and if they conflict with other programming, if there was a way for them to multitask and receive and be supported across multiple programs, if they would make this as a selection and a choice. Because oftentimes they're putting a space where they have to make a choice between this program and another program, the classes, when they're offered, and having worked in high school, I get the mastery schedule and the challenges that come. But I just wondered if that was any of a conversation, because I believe that in my communications and supporting the TAM programs in the county I came out of, some of that scheduling was a challenge, and we've all seen a dip in enrollment in that program. Thank you.
So, yes, unfortunately, yes. And again, it goes back to looking at the advocacy of getting programs at our institutes of higher ed for early college. And I'll let Jeff.
Yeah, one of the things that we've actually engaged in a recent conversation with our community college, the College of Southern Maryland, is that we've requested that there's a consideration for building an early college specifically focused on an AAT that would build the TAM into that, because that dual enrollment connection, if students start earning, and it makes the choice easier if you know it's going directly towards a degree that would lead to a career field that then makes a difference, you know, so all those pieces build up. And so that, I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is something that we're working towards ourselves, so.
All right, and Melissa.
I just really quickly want to let everybody know, in Charles County last year, we had a really big conversation about grade weighting, because TAM programs typically did not have as much weight as honors or AP courses. And so that was another hindrance that we saw for some of our TAM students. So recognizing the importance of the program and continuing to weight it appropriately.
No, absolutely. I even wrote it down. But no, absolutely. No, I'm glad you said it. It is something that has been brought up. We've seen students speak at board meetings about it, which I love, student voice. That we have to, if this is what we want, we need to value it.
As we wrap up, I wanted to mention one other thing. You mentioned the importance that teachers told you about job-embedded PL. So hopefully our work, along with the state boards with PDPs and so forth, really will jumpstart that, because that certainly allows a concentration in that area. The other thing, too, we also worked on the in-district pathway. So I think that could potentially open up some opportunities for this to become a little bit more embedded in how counties might want to do their work. So I think that's an opportunity. So hopefully this board has done some things to facilitate the supports that you need to continue. One other question I do want to ask, and that is, are the current levels of regs that we have in place and the accreditation requirements for higher ed, do they give you the flexibility to do things like apprenticeships and things like that to the degree that you want to?
I think it has opened the door for us, because 3 years ago, 5 years ago, we would not have been able to consider an apprentice program. So it's certainly been that opening of a door. But they get, as I started, as we all started this conversation, there's still work to be done. A lot of it is still rooted, a lot of the work that we're seeing is still rooted in a traditional pathway. So how do we break some of those molds that allow for that embeddedness within the job? And so certainly the embedded professional learning as part of IPDPs, there's so many alphabet soups, as it's embedded in that work, that is great for those people who are currently on the job and working, but the people who need to come in the door, they need to have it tied to that credential as well. And so that's a part that we're still working on, but certainly that we've been looking at closely, what do we do to build out our in-district pathway, but that connection to higher ed also has to be there.
Yeah, and I think when you come back to present again, which I'm assuming all of us are strongly in favor of, when you come back to present again, that's another thing I think the board would probably like to hear is, are there any regs or tweaks to regs or accreditations or things that could actually produce more innovation and still maintain very high standards, of course. Kelly.
So I think I understand what you're getting at, Darren, and so you know, Dr. Keys and his team and I and actually St. Mary's County have had a lot of conversations about what is allowable, and what we've come to find is, I think there's a lot of information, assumptions that are being made with regard to parameters, and they're not always true. So we are working with our MHEC partners to really establish clear understanding of what is allowed, because we've read the regs. So something is amiss if there's this statewide notion that some things can't be done when we're not finding any language that says they can't be done. So we're really trying to get to the bottom of it and working together to do that with our IHE partners and MHEC and our LEAs that really want to take on this innovative step.
That's great. That's the answer I was hoping for. Okay. And I wasn't asking a leading question. I really wanted to know, like, do we have, are we opening up the door? That's what this board is supposed to do. All right. Any other last minute questions or comments? All right. Well, please join me in a huge round of applause for the fantastic presentation.
And I did notice that Dr. Smith joined. I didn't know if he wanted to close out with anything, but he did join for the back end of this. So if I didn't know if he
sure, Dr. Smith.
I'm sorry I stepped out. We were inducting our National Technical National Technical Honor Society at GMJ Forest Career and Technology Center, so I had to step away. But I can't say enough about the work that's been done by everybody, as well as obviously the reception to that work that the Professional Standards Teachers Evaluation Board has provided, and certainly to Ms. Meadows and to the MSDE. I think there is definitely a great deal of momentum to move us all forward in very creative ways to meet the needs of all of our schools. So I just thank you for the opportunity to listen to these great people and hear about the work that they're doing. And we will come back, and I will be there as we talk about some of the great successes that we've seen this year and how we are implementing many of the suggestions you provided. So just thank you very much.
All right, and thank you again. All right, I would propose we take about a 5-minute break. So is 5 minutes okay? All right, so that would bring us back at 11:26, and I think my math's right this time. All right, 5-minute break. Thank you. freezing cold. Ready to go put my coat on, but all right, so hopefully you got a chance to warm up. All right, so if everybody can make their way back, and I believe we're on. All right, so hopefully everyone had a good break. All right, so the next thing on our agenda is the induction regulations for discussion, and Kelly, I believe you're leading that.
Yes, and so this is actually going to be a two-part discussion. It's been quite some time since this board was asked to consult on regulations, and that is a requirement as part of Maryland statute. There is a subsection that says, you know, any regulations that are promulgated in this subsection, this board needs to be consulted. And really, we're talking about like the career ladder for educators, that section. So these induction regulations that I've provided to you are draft. They're in draft form. We have not started the promulgation process. I'm going to ask that you please review them carefully before the December meeting and speak with your constituencies that you're representing, because during the December meeting, one of our agenda items will be a formal process to solicit feedback from this board, and we'll talk more about what that process will look like come December. But that will be the meeting where we really need you to be prepared to provide that feedback, and we will take that feedback back to the State Board of Education, and they will consider that feedback along with feedback from the AIB. And then we've asked our LEAs to provide feedback, and we've asked our educator preparation programs to provide feedback. So the draft that you have does not reflect any feedback that we have solicited thus far. Oh, did we not print them? She's stepped away. I sent them via email. So we're not going to take them out today. We're not going to review them today. I'm just providing them to you. We will go through them, and again, I will ask you to provide feedback during the December meeting. I'll look, and if it's not there, I'll send. Yeah, thank you.
All right. All right, and then the next item is the Administrator Licensure Work Group update, and Dr. Taylor's on that, and I'm on that. No, I'm mentioning, that's like when you call on the student that doesn't want to be called on. I'm merely mentioning that Dr. Taylor is on that group. I'm also on that group, and Ms. Meadows is going to walk us through that. So
this is just an update as well. So our December meeting is going to be lengthy, and I know that we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. I anticipate it will be an extended meeting because we are going to have a lot on the agenda. One of the things that will be on the agenda will be a review of the recommendations from the administrator work group. We concluded our work last night after meeting on several occasions over the past few months. And so part of that work was to make recommendations for the administrator license requirements, and part of those recommendations was to make a recommendation to the State Board of Education on the criteria to move to the licensed principal tier of the career ladder. So two separate, and I'm going to keep them separate because one of them is the licensure requirements needs to be promulgated by this board. In conjunction with the State Board. And the second piece, which is having to do with the licensed principal tier, this board consults. So, and that can get confusing. It got confusing during the work group because the work is so linked together. But we are going to start that conversation in December. We will share some of the recommendations. It will be an informal discussion because what will eventually need to happen is we will have to promulgate regulations for both of those things. But this is just kind of like an introduction to what the recommendations are in December.
All right, any questions about that? And I can just say Kelly's produced excellent leadership with that. I feel like I took a course because there were so many readings on what other states do, and here's what, we looked at all of the surrounding states, we looked at the current research and so forth. So yeah, it's really been eye-opening, I think. And I don't know, I'm not trying to speak for Dr. Taylor, but I was quite happy with the work that the group has done. Because sometimes folks weaken standards and so I was pleased. So hopefully you will be as well. I was proud of the work that they did. All right, so next thing on the agenda is the approval for the October meeting minutes, and I believe you have a copy of that. So let's take a few minutes, and if you haven't had time, let's just take a quick look through that, and then I'll entertain a motion to adopt, and then we'll bring it up for discussion. All right, before I entertain a motion to adopt, did anybody see anything that needs to be corrected or changed? Yes, go ahead.
I'm Ms. Greenabot Hanley, not doctor. I really appreciate the extra degree, but that is. Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Carpenter?
I was virtual last meeting.
Okay. And, yep,
I was absent.
And I was also absent.
okay, any other changes?
Approval of the June minutes down in the proposed agenda items.
Did we approve the June minutes?
No, is that supposed to be approval of the October minutes? September. Oh, September.
Oh, September.
Mhm.
Okay, so that would be approval of the September. All right. Dr. Colley?
Under the preparing equitable leaders, the second line, could we just strike the state for Towson State University?
All right, anything else? All right, so I need a motion to approve the minutes with the additions, corrections, and deletions as suggested.
I move to approve the minutes.
All right, I need a second. All right, seconded by Dr. Taylor. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, any opposed or abstentions? Dr. Carlin?
I'm just abstaining because I wasn't here.
Okay, so one abstention. All right, so we have an approval of the minutes. All right, and then the next thing is the approval of the meeting calendar. So if you can find that. So folks did mention a couple of things, so I'll bring that up. You'll notice where it says July 3rd. The July 3rd meeting, usually, our meeting in July is often to be determined, so we often do not meet. So I don't know if we want to move that to, because July 3rd, the day before, a lot of people will be traveling, so we often don't have a quorum. Now, I know this year we did meet in July because of a number of items that we need, but that's really rare. So we might want to suggest that that one be as needed. I think we could put with that. And then the other feedback I've heard, October 2nd apparently is Yom Kippur. So we, if it's the board's pleasure, we might want to look for an alternate date for that. So the next Thursday after that would be what? I don't. Okay. So would we like to move October 2nd to October 9th? I'm just kind of looking at head nods. Okay, so October 2nd would become October 9th, and July 3rd would become no meeting or as needed. Could we put, how do we usually phrase that? Do you remember, Kelly?
I think I just publish it and then I take it down if we decide in June.
Okay.
To the 10th then.
Yeah, okay. So we'll just put tentative. Can we publish it with the word tentative?
Yeah.
Okay. So July 3rd becomes tentative.
There was another, I think it was the the local superintendents. Do you have a conference? There was 1 month that we were like, we need to always change this, and I couldn't remember which one it was.
I believe it's the M&S conference.
Yeah, so November and October, we do the first week of October, which is May, and we usually do the first week of November, which is our M&S conference, and so that always creates a little trouble.
Yeah, so we did go to the second week in October, but maybe going to the second week in November as well.
So the second we would make that November what? 13th, thank you.
In November, it was 13th, in October, it was 11th.
The 9th. All right, any other changes?
Well, I think there was some confusion. I heard tentative and 10th for July. So since it's tentative, we should probably move it to the 10th in case we need it, because I don't see us wanting to meet on July 3rd. So tentative on the 10th.
That's a
Does that
great
make
idea.
sense?
Yep. All right. Any other conflicts or changes that we see that are needed? All right. So I will entertain a motion to adopt the 2025 meeting calendar with the following changes. July 3rd would now read July 10th tentative. October 2nd will be moved to October 9th. And November 6th will now become November 13th. All right, so I need a motion to adopt that as summarized.
I move the updated dates for meeting in
All right.
2025.
So Ms. Yoho makes the motion, a second by Dr. Taylor. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so we have a meeting calendar. So that's great. Now, a heftier meeting for December. All right, so Kelly, if you could walk us through what you're thinking the items are for that.
So December is going to be a busy month for us because we have a lot of regulations that are coming back for adoption. So the 3 sets of regulations that we granted permission to publish a few months ago, they finished with their public comments. So December, I'm due to bring them back to you for adoption, and then they'll go to the State Board of Education on January. So we've got, that's COMAR 13807, 0602. So there's 2 program approval regulations. We have the definitions and the requirements. That'll come back. The pathways to teacher licensure will come back, and the whole package of educator licensure will come back. So I'll be asking for adoption in December for all 3 of those. So that's 3 agenda items right there.
And you've either sent those out or you'll be sending those out correctly?
I have not sent those out yet.
Okay, but you will be sending them out well in
Yes,
advance?
yes.
Okay, so that way we'll have plenty of time to take them back one more time
Yep.
to our groups, get feedback, so we're ready to go.
Yes, they will
Okay.
be a part of the December meeting materials.
Okay, and the sooner I'm assuming we get those, the better, just because obviously we're meeting later in November, so there's not as much turnaround time for the December meeting.
Gotcha.
Okay.
We're meeting later? Wait, in December?
No, I mean, this was
Oh,
1 week
okay.
later than what it normally
Gotcha,
is.
gotcha.
There's not enough time between meetings.
Okay.
Yep, that's my point.
So that's 3. A 4th agenda item is we are going to seek permission to publish those incorporation of reference regulations that we discussed last month, where it was just for discussion, where we're updating the national standards for our program approval regulations. We're going to talk about those induction regulations, which I just sent to everybody because you're right, they weren't attached to the email. So we will expect feedback that day for the induction regulations. We will have to take some time to go through that consultation process before we collect that feedback, so that will be an item by itself. I think that's it. But that's more than we usually do, so we may want to think about extending the meeting.
All right, so normally when we extend the meeting, we have a break for lunch and then we come back. And then when do you usually adjourn for those?
I would suggest 2.
Okay. All right. So we would have lunch catered in. We would break for lunch, I'm assuming, then come back. And if we finish early, then that's wonderful. Okay, but that would give us plenty of time and that'll allow for adequate planning. Yes?
Do we also have our new member orientation in
Yes.
December? Okay.
Yes, and that will be after the meeting. No, December.
It's gonna be
December.
Okay.
Sean couldn't be here today.
Okay, so then
Right.
so then for new members till 2:30 in December. Okay.
That's what I would plan if you're a new member.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's good. That gets a lot out of the way. So good, get it all done. A lot of people travel, that's kind of good. So you don't have too much more to do. All right. So now we have our December agenda that has been set. We don't need to take a vote on that, right? No, okay, I don't think so. Just double checking. Haven't been the chair for a while. I was waiting for Valita. All right. I believe that takes us through the entire agenda that we have for today. Is there anybody else who had anything to offer for the good of the group? All right. Well, all right. Then without objection, I will adjourn the meeting at 11:44. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'll look forward to seeing you again in December, and we'll dress all festive because, you know, it's the holidays. Wear your best outfit for on camera. All right. Thanks, everyone. Drive carefully home. And bye to everybody online.